20 years ago, a young student named Emily Harper vanished during a stormy night in the lakeside town of St. Mary's, leaving behind her silver car and a trail of unanswered questions. Authorities suspected an accident, but no body was found, no traces, and the investigation eventually hit a terrifying dead end. Yet for all those years, Emily's grieving mother never gave up hope, sending letters to the police each year with a plea, "Please don't forget her." Then one day, when a group of civilian divers accidentally scanned the lakebed with sonar, they discovered a strange metallic shape, a small detail but enough to reopen the case and shake the entire Maryland community. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love mysteries like this, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts below. In the fall of 2005, Leonardtown, Maryland, was shrouded in endless rain. Wind from the Part 1 listening. In the fall of 2005, Leonardtown, Maryland, was shrouded in relentless rain. Winds from the Chesapeake Bay carried a chilling mist, sweeping through the old oaks, lining the roads, rattling rusted signs and flickering yellow streetlights. St. Mary's Lake, vast and dark as a black mirror, reflected distant lightning and the solitary beams of passing cars at night. In a small wooden house in Lexington Park, a friend's birthday party was in full swing. Pop music mingled with laughter, the scent of apple pie and sweet wine filling the warm air. Emily Harper, 19, a freshman at Towson University, had come home for the weekend to visit her mother and was invited to the party by friends. She sat quietly in a corner, her jean jacket draped over the chair, her hair slightly damp from the rain. Her gentle face and distant eyes went unnoticed as she repeatedly checked her phone, as if waiting for a message that never came. Sarah Klein, her childhood best friend, noticed her detachment. The two had once been close, but after Emily transferred schools, their contact had dwindled. Their initially warm conversation quickly turned tense, vague complaints escalating into harsh words. A few friends tried to intervene, but both fell silent. Emily stood, grabbed her bag, slipped on her damp jean jacket, and said she needed to leave. Sarah tried to stop her but could only watch as the door opened. The sound of wind and rain rushed in, carrying the scent of apple wine and extinguished candles. The door closed, leaving a heavy silence in the once lively room. Emily's silver Honda Accord pulled out of the parking lot, its red taillights blurring in the rain before vanishing. No one at the party knew it was the last time they would see her. The next morning, the sky remained gray. Light rain pattered steadily on the tin roof of the Harper house. Margaret Harper, Emily's mother, woke up, brewed coffee, and prepared breakfast. She waited for the familiar sound of a car, but the road outside was silent. Passing Emily's room, she noticed the door ajar. The bed was unmade, a bag sat on the desk, and Emily's phone lay forgotten, its screen dark. A chill of unease ran down her spine. Stepping onto the porch, Margaret looked at the rain-soaked yard. The empty spot where Emily's Honda usually parked was filled with rainwater, reflecting the silver-gray sky. She called Emily's friends, but no one knew anything. No one saw her leave the party. By noon, Margaret returned, drenched and trembling. The landline phone on the shelf rang, its sound echoing in the cold house. Margaret picked up, her voice breaking as she spoke to the St. Mary's County Police dispatcher. The response was brief and professional, but offered no comfort. They would come right away, they said. As she hung up, the rain started again. She stood by the window, staring down the road toward St. Mary's Lake, where the oaks stood silent in the wind. Somewhere out there, amidst the rain and water, her daughter had vanished, leaving a cold, empty void in a town once peacefully quiet. Part 2, Investigation and Initial Search. That afternoon, as the rain poured heavily, the 1st Mary's County Sheriff's patrol car pulled up to the Harper house. 2 officers in dark raincoats stepped out, notebooks in hand. Margaret Harper greeted them, exhausted, her eyes red from sleeplessness. They asked the usual questions: when she last saw her daughter, what Emily was wearing when she left, whether she had any recent conflicts. Each answer seemed to sharpen Margaret's fear. She handed them a photo of Emily from her high school graduation. Long brown hair, bright eyes, a clear smile. The police opened an official missing persons case. Detective Jason Rudd, 38, was assigned to lead it. He had handled many missing persons cases, caused by storms or accidents, involving cars plunging into the lake, but something about this case unsettled him. Every accident leaves a trace, he told his subordinate, while studying a map of the area. Only someone hidden disappears this cleanly. On the first day, they scoured the route from Lexington Park to Leonardtown. The recent storm had left countless puddles and thick mud on the road. Tire tracks were blurred and indistinct. Search teams were mobilized, including a local volunteer rescue squad, led by Robert Hanley, a 43-year-old, tall, well-known man in town for saving a boy from drowning. He arrived in a red raincoat, his voice calm, taking charge of coordinating the lake area. "We'll search every square meter around St. Mary's Lake," he told a local reporter. His image beside a motorboat appeared on the evening news, described as a hero aiding the community. Meanwhile, Detective Rudd and 2 officers interviewed those close to Emily. Lucas Mendez, her boyfriend, met them in his small apartment in the town center. He said Emily left the party around midnight, calling him while driving home, her voice panicked. "There's a car following me, I think their lights are off." Then the call cut out. When asked about their last text exchange, Lucas hesitated, saying it was private. His phone was seized for analysis. In it, police found an old message sent a week earlier. "Don't do that, you'll regret it." No one knew what that meant. When questioned about the party, Sarah Klein said she and Emily had a small misunderstanding, and that Emily showed no signs of distress or odd behavior. But Rudd noticed she was evasive, her eyes darting, when asked about the moment Emily left the party. There was something between them, a gap in her story. He noted it but focused on the search for now. Over the next 3 days, search teams split into groups, combining police, volunteers, K-9 units, and divers. The rain persisted, clouding the lake's waters. Metal detectors and drones were limited by the weather. Results: no traces, no skid marks, no glass fragments. That morning, a witness came forward. A truck driver who claimed he saw a silver Honda parked on Route 4 near the lake at dawn. He recalled clearly, the rain was heavy, the car's headlights shone on the water, then went out. Police redirected the search to this area. Rudd followed tire tracks, mixed in the wet mud, crouching to touch a fresh skid mark, his eyes scanning the lake's edge. "If the car went in," he murmured, "it's out there somewhere." Hanley stepped forward, calmly stating, "No way, the currents are too strong, too dangerous." His tone was odd, too certain, too final, as if he knew what lay beneath the water. The police shifted focus to the lake, establishing a wider search perimeter. Rudd requested a sonar scan of the southern area, where the water flowed slowly and might hold submerged objects. But Hanley strongly objected. "The water there's deep, the bottom's muddy, and the currents are dangerous for divers." He suggested focusing on the north shore, a public access area. Rudd considered it, but the bad weather made the south shore difficult to access, so he postponed the plan. News of the disappearance flooded local reports. The front page of the St. Mary's Chronicle ran the headline, "Student Vanishes Amid Storm." Emily's smiling graduation photo appeared next to an image of a similar Honda. The rain continued, and the search teams tirelessly scanned every square meter of the lake. Hanley became a familiar face on TV, the spokesperson of hope, a symbol of rescue efforts. He spoke of faith and perseverance, his voice full of emotion. Margaret Harper watched the news from her car, gripping the steering wheel. To her the phrase, "We won't stop," sounded like a cold promise. Days passed, and the search expanded to the forested areas around the lake. The rain eased, and the water receded, revealing thick black mud. Rudd and technicians with metal detectors moved cautiously along the shore. He noticed something off. The ground was too flat, with no signs of erosion or tire tracks, as if someone had cleaned it up. Hanley, walking alongside, brushed it off. "The wind and currents erase everything." Rudd nodded, but his eyes said otherwise. His instinct screamed that this cleanliness wasn't natural. As the search entered its second week, the rescue team officially paused operations due to hazardous weather. Hanley addressed the press, his voice somber. "We've done all we can. We hope she's just sheltering somewhere." As reporters left, Rudd stood by the lake, staring at the murky water. He didn't believe in accidents. "No accident vanishes both person and car," he said softly. The wind blew through the reeds, carrying a cold mist. A vague feeling stirred in him. Something was being hidden, just beneath the calm surface of the water. After 10 days of searching in the rain, Rescue teams dispersed, and soggy flyers were torn from poles by the wind. Parts of the lake area were cordoned off, but later reopened as they held no further investigative value. Detective Jason Rudd still visited the site daily, though the official search had stopped. He rechecked old coordinates, reviewed reports, searching for an overlooked detail. Everything remained as it was: mud, water, and an unsettling emptiness. 2 weeks after the disappearance, a fisherman reported finding a pair of women's shoes washed up near St. George Island Bridge. The town stirred, rumors spread. Some said a body would soon be found. Others thought Emily was swept into the bay. When the forensic team arrived, the shoes were covered in algae and mud, a different brand than Emily's. Tests confirmed they weren't hers. That faint hope died the same day. Meanwhile, Lucas Mendez, Emily's boyfriend, faced blame from local media and online forums. Anonymous posts accused him of being controlling, jealous, and possibly doing something that stormy night. Though police verified he was home, with phone data and apartment camera footage as proof, the public didn't relent. Whenever Lucas stepped outside, people avoided his gaze or whispered behind him. He left town the next month, carrying a voicemail box full of threats and curses. Margaret Harper persisted. Each morning she visited the lake, placing a bouquet of daisies by a missing Emily Harper side. She didn't tell anyone that recently. The house phone rang at night. A man's raspy voice spoke slowly, almost whispering, "She's in the water." The first time she thought it was a mistake. The second time, the same voice repeated before cutting off. She reported it to the police, but the call traced back to a payphone near the bridge. No cameras, no traces. Rudd listened to the recording, his face darkening. The voice was not only chilling, but familiar. While Rudd quietly reviewed files, Robert Hanley, the rescue team leader, became a familiar face on TV. He gave interviews, stressing the volunteer team's efforts. "We dove in dangerous conditions, searched every river bend, every reed bed. No one wants this to end without answers." His image, red rescue jacket, calm gaze, was hailed by media as a symbol of dedication. Locals admired him. Papers called him Leonard Town's hero. But Rudd felt uneasy. He recalled Hanley's objection to scanning the lake's southern area. The way he said dangerous currents sounded like a prohibition, not advice. In his office, Rudd spread out a topographic map, marking the entire search area. Red ink covered the northern shore, but the south remained blank. He'd wanted to revisit it, but no one was willing. Budgets were drained, media moved on, and superiors ordered a temporary suspension until new evidence emerges. Rudd objected, but it was futile. In the afternoons, he drove to the lake alone. Sometimes he saw Hanley by the shore, holding a coffee, staring at the water. "The water's deeper than you think, Rudd," Hanley said, half joking, half warning. "Some things sink and never come up." Rudd didn't reply. He just watched the water, where drizzle formed ripples. In town, hope faded. Some believed Emily had left New York, Chicago, anywhere to escape a dull life. Others thought she was dead, swept into the lake, or off a bridge. Blaming the storm, youthful impulsiveness, or bad luck was easiest. Only Margaret refused to believe it. Each night she left the porch light on, the door ajar, as if waiting for the familiar sound of a car returning. At month's end, the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office held a brief press conference. The spokesperson read a statement. "After over 10 days of searching, no new evidence has been found. We are suspending the search, but the case remains open." Margaret attended, sitting in the back row. At the words, "suspending," she bowed her head, her hands clenching until they turned white. Rudd stood behind, silent. He knew this meant the case would be temporarily shelved, and in reality, most such cases were never reopened. That evening, Leonard Town returned to its usual quiet. On TV, Hanley appeared once more, saying the rescue team did all they could. The footage ended with him by the lake, wind tugging at his red raincoat. Across the screen, Rudd muted the sound, staring at that face, its smile too calm for someone who'd failed to find a body. He felt he was missing something, so close yet out of reach. As night fell, the rain began again, steady and cold. The missing Emily Harper sign swayed in the wind, its bold letters reflecting streetlights like smudged tears. The case fell silent. No body, no car, no explanation. And somewhere in the lake's depths, something lay still, waiting to be seen. The police had cleared out. The investigation area signs were removed, leaving only an old, weathered plastic sign that read "Missing, Emily Harper," tilting in the wind and mud. The people of Leonardtown gradually returned to their daily routine. The disappearance was mentioned less often, then became an unfinished story told in coffee shops, amid whispers and averted glances. The case file was archived in early 2006, stored in the cold vault of the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office. A simple label, "Missing Person, Harper, Emily 2005. No one opened it anymore. The press stopped asking, and television moved on to newer stories. For the town, the case was like a storm that had passed. It left traces, but no one wanted to look back. Only Margaret Harper, the mother, never stopped. She kept the small house on the outskirts, exactly as it was when her daughter vanished. Emily's room remained tidy, blankets neatly folded, walls still adorned with old music posters. Every year, on October 17, the day Emily left the birthday party, Margaret wrote a handwritten letter to the sheriff's office. "Please don't forget her." There was no reply, but she kept writing. The last letter before 2025 had yellowed, its ink smudged with tears. Detective Jason Rudd, who once led the case, continued working for another 10 years. He handled dozens of other cases, but none haunted him like Emily Harper's. He kept a map of the lake, crime scene photos and reports in a personal file. Sometimes on quiet nights alone on duty, he opened it, sitting still for hours, staring at the words, "No new leads." He believed, with a vague but persistent feeling, that Emily's disappearance wasn't a simple accident. He tried to reopen the investigation in 2012, but his superiors refused. No evidence, no budget. In 2018, Rudd retired. He lived alone in a small apartment near St. George's Bridge, passing by the lake daily. Sometimes he stopped, gazing at the dark water reflecting the sky, his heart heavy. He carried a vague guilt that he had let the case sink with time. On rainy nights, he remembered the night Emily vanished, and the face of Robert Hanley, the hero in the red jacket standing in the spotlight, saying, "We did all we could." Hanley, on the other hand, became a community icon. In 2007, he was awarded Volunteer of the Year for his rescue efforts during the February storm. The press hailed him as the man who never gives up in the face of danger. He was invited to speak at the high school, posed for photos with children, and appeared in water safety campaigns. No one remembered that he had led the failed search for Emily Harper. When someone mentioned it, he only smiled faintly. "I still pray for her every night." To the town, he was a symbol of kindness. To Rudd, he was an unanswered question. Sarah Klein, the last friend to see Emily, left Leonardtown in 2000. She moved west, changed her phone number, and cut contact with everyone in town. Some said she became a nurse in Colorado. Others claimed she married and never spoke of the past. When asked, her mother only said curtly, she needed to forget. Margaret Harper, for nearly 20 years, lived in a familiar rhythm. Every morning on the porch watching the lake, every evening lighting a candle under her daughter's photo. In the kitchen, an old radio played the local news. When Hanley's name came up in a charity report, she simply turned it off, saying nothing. She held no resentment, only a quiet belief that her daughter was still out there, waiting to be found. Time faded the town's memory, but not the sense of something unresolved. Sometimes, morning fishermen claimed they saw strange lights under the lake, reflections from somewhere deep below. The story spread, becoming a tale for campfire nights. Leonardtown turned the disappearance into a sad legend, told to visitors and forgotten soon after. In 2020, a small article appeared in the local magazine, marking 15 years since the disappearance. Emily's photo reappeared, faded and blurry from age. Below it, an anonymous reader commented, "Some are found, but some were never searched for in the right place." Rudd read it online, his heart stinging. He didn't know why it made him think of Hanley. In March 2024, Hanley was interviewed for his 60th birthday. He spoke of 2 decades of service to the community, teaching free swimming lessons at Leonardtown Wharf. The camera panned across his face, older, but his eyes still steady. When asked if he remembered the Emily Harper case, he replied, "Some things we have to learn to let go." That answer made Rudd, watching the news in his living room, turn off the TV. He stepped onto the porch and watched the spring rain fall outside the window. That night, Margaret wrote another letter to the sheriff's office. It was no different from the others, a single line written in trembling script, "Please don't forget her." But this time the letter didn't sit quietly in a file drawer. A young employee, New to the job for less than 3 months, read it while sorting archive. She sent a copy to her boyfriend, an amateur diver with a civilian search group called Deepwater Recovery. In February 2025, the group announced plans to survey St. Mary's Lake in Maryland, one of the areas never fully scanned by sonar in old missing persons cases. The news spread on social media and quickly hit local media. One rainy morning, Margaret watched the report on her old TV, her hands trembling slightly. 20 years later, for the first time her heart raced again. Somewhere someone was preparing to search for her daughter once more. On an April morning in 2025, a thin fog blanketed St. Mary's Lake. The water was calm, rippling only when the wind brushed the reeds along the shore. Margaret Harper sat on an old wooden chair on her porch, the radio playing softly with the local news. The anchor's voice came through. A civilian diving team called Deepwater Recovery has arrived in Leonardtown to survey St. Mary's Lake, the site linked to the 2005 disappearance of student Emily Harper. She looked up, froze. 20 years of silence, and now that voice, that case, was being mentioned again. She gripped her teacup, her hands trembling slightly. By noon, a small white van parked at her gate. 3 people stepped out, 2 men, 1 woman, wearing waterproof jackets and carrying large equipment cases. The woman in front, tall with neatly tied hair, raised a hand in greeting. "Mrs. Harper, I'm Maya Torres, team leader of Deepwater Recovery. Thank you for reaching out to us." Her voice was low, decisive, with the tone of someone used to giving orders. Behind her were Ethan Cole, the sonar technician, younger with headphones around his neck, and Tom Bishop, the ROV remotely operated vehicle diver. Margaret invited them in, poured coffee, and placed Emily's photo on the table. Maya studied it for a long moment. "We've reviewed the case file," she said. "The southern part of the lake was never scanned thoroughly with sonar. That's where we'll start." Margaret nodded, her eyes wet, saying only, "Thank you." Just knowing someone still remembers. That afternoon, they reached St. Mary's Lake. The water was murky brown, reflecting the overcast sky. A cold breeze blew in from the bay. Maya spread a topographic map of the lake on the van's hood, pointing to an area marked Danger Area, skipped by the 2005 rescue team. "We'll focus here," she said. Ethan powered up a handheld sonar, checking the battery, while Tom prepped the ROV, a small yellow diving device, with a camera and lights. "If there's anything down there, we'll see it." They started early the first day. The rubber boat glided across the water. Ethan sat at the back, eyes fixed on the sonar screen mounted on an aluminum frame. Sound waves emitted steady ping noises, traveling to the lakebed. Maya logged coordinates, snapping screenshots. The police weren't present, they'd only been told this was a voluntary survey. Margaret stood on the shore, wrapped in a thin coat, watching from afar. The first few hours showed nothing unusual. The sonar displayed a jumble of rocks, fallen trees and thick mud. "Every old lake has junk," Ethan said, a hint of disappointment in his voice. But as they moved farther south, where the water darkened, the sonar signal changed. The screen showed a large unnatural shape, angular, half buried in mud. Ethan frowned, zooming in. "Hold on, this isn't a tree." Maya leaned. The outline sharpened, a rectangle with curved edges, over 4 meters long. The sides reflected sound waves strongly, crisply. She signaled Tom to log the coordinates. "Could be a car," Ethan said, his voice dropping. "High chance." Maya bit her lip, scanning the calm lake. "Log it," she said. "Mark this as point A7. They repeated the scan, changing angles, each time seeing the same shape. The sonar showed the object at about 7 meters deep, just over 40 meters from shore, not far from the trail to the southern wood. As evening fell, clouds thickened, and distant thunder rumbled. Maya halted operations to avoid bad weather. They brought the boat to shore, setting up a tent to review data. Ethan extracted sonar images onto a larger screen. The black and white image clearly showed the object, its front slightly raised, its rear buried in mud. "That's a car," Tom said firmly. "Look at the body curve, the proportions match." Maya crossed her arms, staring at the image in silence. For 20 years teams had searched, but no one scanned this area. She opened the printed case file, checking the 2005 search map. The red mark for A7 sat squarely in the unsafe zone from the old rescue team's map, where Robert Hanley had refused to use Sonar. A strange feeling ran down her spine. That night, at the motel near downtown, Maya sat alone with her laptop. She reviewed an old 2005 interview of Hanley that Ethan found online. In it he wore a red rescue jacket, speaking slowly. "We searched the entire lake. There's nothing down there." In the final frame, his eyes flicked to the camera calm, but for a split second, Maya sensed something artificial. The next day they returned to the lake earlier. Fog still lingered, the water eerily still. Ethan restarted the sonar, scanning deeper. The signal grew stronger, the metal object's shape clearer. 2 wheels, a curved roof, a slightly open door. The team fell silent. 7.5 meters deep, 4.5 meters long, Ethan said. Buried about a third, in mud. Maya nodded, turning to Tom. "Prep the ROV." He opened the equipment case, checking the camera, lights and control cables. When the robot was ready, they lowered it into the water. The cable slid through Maya's hands, the electric motor humming softly. On the screen, murky water appeared, with bits of mud floating. The LED lights shone a few meters ahead, then stopped at the object. A curved metal edge gleamed under the light. A patch of silver paint showed through the silt. Ethan held his breath. "That's a car body." The ROV moved closer, scanning a broken window, moving along the side. No one was inside, only strands of algae swaying in the driver's compartment. The rear windshield reflected a shimmering light. Tom stabilized the robot, adjusting the angle. A faint logo appeared on the rear. Honda. Maya stared at the screen, her voice low. "Confirm the location. This could be Emily Harper's car." No one spoke. The wind picked up, rippling the water. Across the shore, the oaks swayed, their leaves rustling as if whispering something long buried. They pulled the ROV up, wiping mud from its lens. Maya logged the exact coordinates, closing the file. "Tomorrow," she said, "we notify the police. But tonight, I want one more verification." Her eyes hardened, reflected in the mirror-like water. 20 years later, a case thought buried with time had been awakened. That night, after retrieving the ROV from the water, Maya Torres barely slept. She sat in front of her laptop, in the small Leonardtown motel room, replaying the recorded video. Each slow-motion review showed the LED light glinting off wet mud, revealing the outline of the metal object. A car half buried at the lake's bottom. The Honda logo appeared clearly in one brief frame, enough for her to believe that, after 20 years, they had found the silver Accord Emily Harper drove on that fateful rainy night. The next morning, before the sun cleared the fog, Deepwater Recovery returned to St. Mary's Lake. The air smelled of mud and rotting algae, the water unnaturally still. Ethan powered up the sonar, checking point A7. The signal matched yesterday's, a 4.5-meter metal object, buried deep in mud, about 40 meters from shore. Tom Bishop checked the ROV, adding an extra light and a high-resolution camera. "We're going back for a clearer view," Maya said, her voice firm. "If this is the Accord, we need visual proof before notifying the police." Ethan nodded, starting the ROV. The electric motor whirred softly, the cable slipping through his hands as the robot descended. The screen flickered for a few seconds, then lit up, the murky, pale yellow water drifting by like smoke. When the light reached the bottom, the first image appeared, the car's front, half buried in mud. The beam swept across, reflecting off patches of silver paint. Tom angled the camera, moving the ROV closer. Mud stirred in cloudy swirls, drifting slowly in the still water. The driver's door was ajar, revealing a dark, gaping gap. "The door's open. That's not natural," Ethan said quietly. "If the car sank from a skid, the door should be closed." Maya noted it, her eyes fixed on the screen. The ROV circled the car. The left mirror was shattered, glass clinging to the frame. The rear license plate was missing, leaving 2 rusted screw holes. The front had a large dent, as if struck from the side. Maya signaled Tom to pause. "Zoom in," she said. The camera slowly focused, catching the mud-caked door handle and a long scratch along the lower edge. "This can't be a simple accident," she murmured. They continued scanning, front seats covered in algae, a rusted steering wheel. The seatbelt still latched. No body was found. "No one's inside," Tom confirmed, his voice low. "If this is her car, Someone opened the door and got out, or was pulled out before it sank. The three fell silent. Only the steady ping of the sonar echoed across the water. Maya saved the video, then looked up at the lake. A cold wind rose, the fog lifting, the pale sun casting a silvery sheen on the water. "We're calling the police," she said firmly. "If this is the 2005 car, it's evidence." And that case was never closed. That afternoon, they went to the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office. The small office had old maps and staff photos on the walls. A young officer on duty listened to Maya's explanation, momentarily stunned. "You're saying St. Mary's Lake, the Emily Harper case?" "Yes," Maya replied, opening her laptop to play the video. He watched the screen silently for a few minutes, then stood. "Wait here." 5 minutes later, he returned with a tall silver-haired man in a light blue shirt, his eyes deep, familiar. "Who are you?" His voice was low, slow, tinged with surprise. "Maya Torres, Deepwater Recovery. We're surveying St. Mary's Lake. I think you worked this case." The man nodded slightly. "Rudd. Jason Rudd." He leaned down to watch the video. When the car's image clarified, he froze, then took a deep breath. 20 years flooded back in his eyes, the rain, the murky lake, the helplessness that never faded. He stared at the frame, the open door, the missing license plate, the dent on the left side. "That's it," he said softly, almost to himself. "That's it." The police quickly cordoned off the area, calling in forensics and rescue teams. Word spread internally within hours, and by the next morning, the media was at the lake. The local news ticker read, "Car suspected to belong to 205 missing person found in Leonardtown." Margaret Harper heard from a neighbor. She put on a coat and walked nearly 2 miles to the lake. When she arrived, the area was barricaded, police cars lining the shore. Maya stepped out from the command tent, recognized her, and hurried over. "Mrs. Harper, I think you should rest." But Margaret didn't listen. Her eyes locked on the video screen. The silver Honda, under the lake, half buried in mud, the driver's door open, as if waiting for someone to return. She covered her mouth, stifling a sob, but tears spilled over. "She never left," she whispered, her voice breaking. Jason Rudd, standing a few steps away, turned away, his eyes blurred in the damp fog. 20 years ago, he'd promised not to forget this case. Now that promise returned with an immeasurable weight. The forensics team prepared to recover the car. Cables were tied around the frame, the winch roared, and water swirled in circles. The mud gave way, and the car slowly rose, drenched and deformed, its silver paint patchy under the light. When the first wheel broke the surface, the crowd fell silent. Maya and Rudd stood side by side, wordless. On the shore, camera lenses captured every second. To most it was just a car forgotten underwater, but to Margaret Harper, it was proof of 2 decades of waiting, confirmation that her memories weren't delusion. The car, a symbol of loss, had returned, carrying the promise from a rainy night long ago, that the truth could not stay buried forever. As the car was set on the ground, murky water poured from the open door, the smell of rusted metal filling the air. Rudd stepped closer, peering into the empty cabin. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "Welcome back, Emily." The sky above Leonardtown was pale gray, but for the first time in 20 years, St. Mary's Lake was no longer still. Ripples spread, breaking against the shore, as if the lake had exhaled after too long a sleep. The silver Honda Accord rested on the shore of St. Mary's Lake, covered in mud and moss, its body warped, the driver's door slightly ajar, as if the driver had just stepped out. Water dripped from the engine compartment, forming a thick black streak that reeked of metal and rotting algae. Outside the temporary barricade, locals and reporters gathered, mingled with the clicking of cameras. Police sealed off the area, setting up tarps to secure the scene. Jason Rudd stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the car. 20 years of waiting, and now, the final piece of evidence he had sought, was right in front of him. The forensic team began their work. A technician used a pressure hose to wash away the mud caked on the car's body, revealing patches of silver paint glinting unevenly. As the mud cleared, a large dent on the left side became visible, a deep indentation. The steel crumpled in. Rudd crouched to inspect it, lightly touching the cold surface with his gloved hand. He shook his head. This couldn't be from hitting a rock, or falling into the lake. This was a solid object, with a horizontal force. The technician took notes, photographed the scene, and measured the dent's depth. A scratch ran from the edge of the rear door to near the front fender. The force angled, clearly intentional. When the driver's door was fully opened, the interior revealed chaos. The driver's seat was coated in dried algae, the dashboard rusted but structurally intact. In the glove compartment, they found a woman's handbag, its strap half torn. Inside were a wallet, a few receipts, and a student ID bearing the name Emily Harper, Towson University. Next to it was a round-faced watch, stopped, its hands frozen. On the floor, wedged under the seat rail, they discovered a metal hairpin, rusted brown and tangled with algae. When light hit it, it glinted faintly, a small but weighty piece of evidence. Maya Torres, standing beside Rudd, meticulously recorded each finding. If she was in the car when it went down, the door should have been closed. Here it's open, the handbag's intact, no signs of panic. Rudd nodded slightly, replying softly, "This wasn't an accident, someone staged it." He looked back at the dent, an old feeling resurfacing. Something had been deliberately erased from the 2005 scene. The forensic team continued collecting samples. They took mud, chipped paint, and crucially, contact samples from the driver's door, the metal between the frame and handle. A technician remarked, "We might find DNA from touch, if we're lucky." Rudd ordered the samples sent immediately to the state lab in Annapolis for priority process. He knew 20 years was too long for biological traces, but in cold cases, a single surviving cell could unlock the entire past. As the forensics team worked, Rudd stood by the lake with Maya. The water was clearer now, but under the afternoon sun, it still carried the reddish-brown hue of mud and time. "Were you ever here?" Maya asked. Rudd nodded. "I led the first search. We never scanned this area." Hanley, the rescue team leader, said the water had currents. She paused, then asked, "Where's he now?" "Still here, teaching kids to swim, volunteering. The whole town loves him," Rudd replied, his eyes fixed on the water. "Maybe because they forgot that heroes can lie too." The car was transported to the technical examination station. The press went wild. Car from 2005, disappearance recovered, cause of sinking unclear. The Leonardtown community buzzed with speculation. People compared notes, argued, but no one had answered. For Margaret Harper, that evening, she sat in front of the TV, watching footage of the Accord being pulled from the water, camera lights glinting off its wet frame. She touched her daughter's photo on the table, her voice trembling. She didn't run away. She never left this place. At the Annapolis lab, the DNA sample from the door handle was processed, using new touch DNA analysis, allowing extraction of traces from old skin cells left on metal surface. The technician noted, the sample was clear, identity unconfirmed, but the DNA sequence was long enough to compare against the state database. 3 days later, a preliminary report arrived at the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office. Rudd read the first line, "Deformation inconsistent with natural impact. Dent caused by lateral force, low speed, 45-degree angle." He closed his eyes. "The car was pushed," he said softly. Maya stood beside him, silent. She understood. The first physical evidence confirmed what he'd believed for 20 years. Emily Harper didn't have an accident. She was attacked. The afternoon breeze carried the smell of mud and decaying grass across the lake. On the shore, an investigation area sign was erected again, this time not to clean up remnants, but to find answers. In the office, Rudd pinned a photo of the car to the board, drawing a red line under the words, "Not an accident." He stared at the words for a long time, then turned to Maya. "We've just reopened the Emily Harper case." In the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office, Jason Rudd sat motionless at his desk. On the whiteboard behind him, the words "Not an accident" remained, scrawled in red ink. Outside the window, a light rain tapped steadily on the glass. He had waited over 20 years for this moment, but now, the silence made it hard to breathe. Everything was moving faster than ever. The Annapolis lab had just sent the DNA analysis report, a few pages long, but enough to change the entire case. When Rudd opened the envelope, his eyes locked on the final line, in bold. "DNA sample from driver's door handle, matches Robert Hanley's profile, 2018 Water Safety Volunteer Program." His heart tightened. Hanley, the rescue team leader in 2005, hailed as Leonardtown's hero, who had personally overseen the search and blocked sonar scans of the area where the car was found. Now his trace was on the handle of Emily Harper's car. Rudd sat in silence for a long time. In his mind he saw the man in a red rescue jacket, standing before cameras saying, "We did everything we could." He recalled that rainy night when Hanley said, "The south end of the lake has undercurrents too dangerous. Don't waste time there." And for 20 years they hadn't touched that part of the lake where the Accord lay submerged. He called Maya Torres to the office, handing her a copy of the report. Maya read it, then said softly, "I knew something was off." Her eyes gleamed with resolve. He didn't just know. He was there. That afternoon, Rudd submitted the report to his superiors, requesting a search warrant for Robert Hanley's home on grounds of connection to the 2005 disappearance. New forensic evidence. After 2 decades in the cold case files, the Emily Harper case was officially reopened. Hanley's house stood near the old Leonardtown wharf, where he taught kids to swim. When police arrived, he remained calm, unsurprised. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice raspy, eyes unflinching. Rudd simply showed the warrant, saying curtly, "We need to check some documents." Hanley shrugged, stepping aside as if accustomed to police presence. Inside, the house was tidy, walls lined with photos of rescue operations, medals, trophies and certificates from volunteer organizations. In the study, they found a locked wooden cabinet. When opened, Rudd froze. Inside were old files, hand-drawn maps of St. Mary's Lake, and among the papers, a topographic map marked Danger Area, in red ink. Precisely where the Accord was found. Rudd leaned down, his fingers trembling slightly, as he touched the small note in the corner. "Vortex area, unsafe for sonar." The handwriting was Hanley's, clear and bold. An officer nearby said quietly, "Why such a detailed map for an area he said was never scanned?" No one answered. Rudd stared at the map, recalling Hanley's eyes 20 years ago, the way he'd insisted there was nothing under that water. The search continued. In a desk drawer they found a moldy notebook, filled with dense notes from 2000. October 18, St. Mary's Lake search failed. Strong wind. Scanned north area. Rudd flipped a few pages to the end. South, no report. The last 2 words were heavily scratched out in red ink. He deliberately skipped it. Maya said, her voice cold. "Why fear a sonar scan, if there's nothing to hide?" Hanley was brought to the station for preliminary questioning. He sat across from Rudd in a small room, the yellow light casting shadows on his aged face. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said evenly. "I helped search for her, not harm her." Rudd didn't reply, only slid a photo of the car across the table, door open, half sunk in mud. "Then why's your DNA here?" Hanley glanced at the photo, the corner of his mouth twitching in a tired smile. 20 years, Rudd, you still trust DNA sample?" "I've helped move dozens of cars, hundreds of victims. Could have been from a rescue." He was right. Theoretically, it was possible. But Rudd knew the only coincidence here was the area Hanley had forbidden scanning, where the car now lay. The questioning paused, but in Rudd's mind, the pieces had fallen into place. Forensic evidence, the lake map, contradictory statements, all pointed one way. He stepped into the hallway, looking through the frosted glass toward St. Mary's Lake, where the sunset painted the water red. 20 years ago, he'd left this place feeling powerless. Now as the truth took shape, he felt a chill down his spine. "He's not a hero anymore," Maya said, stepping out behind him. Rudd stayed silent, his gaze distant. "No," he replied, his voice low. "He never was." In the fading light, the danger area map lay on the table like a bloodstain among old files. Everything buried under the water had now surfaced, not just the car, but a past carefully hidden for 2 decades. The morning after Hanley's questioning, the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office buzzed with tension. Jason Rudd sat in his office, the St. Mary's Lake map spread out before him, its red ink notes sprawling like a spider web. The circled danger area in the lake south now took center stage. He knew Hanley was lying, but to make a case, they needed a witness, someone who saw something on that fateful night in 2005. Around noon, an officer knocked, handing him a note. "Someone called. Says she knows about the Emily Harper case." Scrawled in messy handwriting, "Sarah Klein, victim's best friend." Rudd read it, his heart tightening. Her name had faded in the files, a faint shadow of the case. 2 hours later, Sarah appeared at the station, a woman in her 30s, thin, with short hair and weary eyes. She clutched her jacket, glancing around as if afraid of being followed. "I didn't want to come here," she said softly, "but I couldn't take it anymore." Rudd gestured for her to sit, starting the recorder. Her voice trembled but was clear. "I knew him, Hanley. Something was off from the start. The night Emily disappeared, I was with the search team. I saw something I never should have seen." The room fell silent. Rudd leaned forward. "Start from the beginning." Sarah took a deep breath. "The morning after she went missing, I went to the lake. Hanley was already there, alone, not waiting for the rescue team. He was staring at the water, his truck's headlights aimed at the south end of the lake. I asked why he didn't wait for the police. He said, 'Just checking something first.' Then he asked me to help, said he'd take the boat out, and I just needed to stand on the shore with a flashlight." She paused, her eyes red. "When he was out on the lake, I saw a light underwater, not from the boat, but a reflection of something big, shiny, like metal. I called out, 'What's that?' But he didn't answer. Minutes later he came back, pale, his clothes soaked. I asked what was down there. He just said, 'Nothing.' Never mentioned this. I thought he was scared, so I didn't press." Rudd listened, jotting down every detail. "Did you tell anyone about this later?" Sarah gave a bitter laugh. "Horse. I tried. A few days later, I told Hanley I wanted to talk to the police. He showed up at my house, stood at my door, didn't knock, just stared. He said, 'If you open your mouth, I'll ruin your life. No one will believe you.' They believe me." She clenched her fists. "I believed him. The whole town loved him. I was just the girl who fought with the victim. If I spoke, they'd think I was jealous or crazy." The room felt heavy as Rudd looked at the woman before him, her eyes haunted. 20 years of silence etched her face like a scar. "You said you saw a light underwater. Are you sure it wasn't a reflection?" "I'm sure," she replied. The light moved, then vanished, like something swallowed it. Then the water bubbled, and Hanley started yelling for me to go home, saying a storm was coming. But there was no thunder that night. Rudd stayed silent, then asked, "Do you remember the location?" Sarah nodded, her hands shaking. "Near the south shore, where you found the car. I recognized the shape of the reeds. That's the spot." Her words stopped him cold. Everything fit perfectly. The danger area map, the lie about currents, and now a witness who saw a metallic glint underwater. He turned off the recorder, looking at her for a long moment. "Are you willing to make an official statement?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded slightly. "I'm scared," she said, "but I don't want to stay silent anymore." That afternoon, Sarah's statement was typed up, accompanied by a diagram of the area she described. Maya Torres reviewed it, saying softly, "If she's right, Hanley didn't just know he was the first to see the car, he went back to cover his tracks." Rudd nodded, his expression tense, and intimidated a witness to ensure silence. That night, Sarah left the station under an officer's escort. As the car drove past the lake road, she glanced at the water. The moonlight shimmered, reflecting just like the light she'd seen 20 years ago. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She knew silence no longer protected anyone. It only aided the darkness. As the car faded into the distance, Rudd returned to his office. On the desk, Emily Harper's photo sat beside the lake map, and the newly signed statement. He drew another red line. Sarah Klein, direct witness, saw light underwater night of 10. He sat in silence for a long time, then said softly, 20 years, but finally the water's starting to speak. The morning after Sarah Klein signed her official statement, Leonardtown was gloomy, with fog blanketing the surface of St. Mary's Lake like a thin white veil. In his small office, Jason Rudd sat at his desk, staring at the lake map, marked with red dots. Next to it was Sarah's statement, stamped confidential. He knew a single account wasn't enough to convict. They needed one final piece, a piece of physical evidence that was undeniable, something to put an end to 20 years of silence. Late that morning, the forensic team reported a new detail from the search of Robert Hanley's house. In the garage, we found a large plastic box containing old rescue gear, including a red life jacket, slightly torn at the shoulder with traces of silver paint. Rudd held the report, his eyes lighting up. Silver paint. The same color as the paint on Emily Harper's Honda Accord. The jacket was immediately sent to the state lab. Outside, the media began to stir as word spread that the police were expanding the investigation in a criminal direction. In town, rumors spread quickly. People whispered that hero Robert Hanley might be directly linked to the 2005 disappearance. Some defended him, insisting it was a misunderstanding. Others stayed silent, their eyes wary. 3 agonizing days passed. Rudd barely left the police station. He called Maya Torres every morning, updating her on the analysis progress. If the paint matches, she said over the phone, this case stops being a suspicion. On the afternoon of the 4th day, the final forensic report arrived. On a short white sheet, just a few lines carried the weight of a verdict. The paint sample from the life jacket matches perfectly with the outer paint composition of the silver Honda Accord, license plate 3XJ20. Not just the same color but the same chemical structure, with the same distinctive impurities of 2003 car paint. It couldn't be a coincidence. Rudd set the report on the desk, taking a deep breath. He recalled that morning 20 years ago when Hanley stood before cameras talking about the rain and hope, while beneath the water's surface, that red jacket carried the traces of guilt. Now that evidence spoke for itself. Maya and Ethan from the Deepwater team were called to the station to review the new data. Ethan brought sonar scans and a map of where the car was found. When overlaid with Hanley's old map, the marked danger area aligned almost perfectly with coordinates A7, where they discovered the Accord. He didn't just know, Maya said, her voice low. He led the search to avoid that very spot. Rudd nodded. We have a witness, DNA, and physical evidence. It's time to file for an arrest. He opened the case file, organizing the evidence in order. DNA results from the driver's door handle matching Robert Hanley. The lake map with the danger area marked in Hanley's handwriting. Sarah Klein's statement confirming his presence at the lake, the night of the disappearance. The life jacket with silver paint matching the victim's car. All were sealed and placed in a red envelope. He signed the arrest warrant recommendation. We're not searching anymore, he said quietly. We're prosecuting. That afternoon, Rudd drove to Margaret Harper's house. She opened the door, her eyes weary but brightening when she saw him. Any news? Rudd nodded, placing the case file on the table. He didn't go into details, only showed her a photo of the red jacket, the shoulder stained with shimmering silver paint under the light. We're about to arrest him, Margaret, he said, not because of suspicion but because of evidence. She didn't respond, only nodded, tears falling onto her hands. I knew it, she whispered. She never left. That night, Rudd sat alone in his office. Outside a light rain fell, the wind blowing across the lake. He turned on the desk lamp, reopening the notebook. On the first page, old handwriting read, missing cause unknown. With a red pen he drew a line through it, and added murder under investigation. The next morning the Marys County Sheriff's Office officially issued an arrest warrant for Robert Hanley on charges of second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. As Rudd signed the document, he looked out the window, seeing St. Mary's Lake, reflecting the pale dawn. 20 years later the water had finally given up its voice. The next morning, Leonardtown was still half asleep as the sky shifted to a dull gray. Fog blanketed the marina, where Robert Hanley still taught kids to swim each week. In the sheriff's office, Jason Rudd signed the arrest warrant, the words Robert Hanley, murder second degree, obstruction of justice, printed boldly at the top. He folded the paper, slipped it into his jacket pocket, his gaze resolute. 20 years of pursuit, and every clue had finally converged on one name. The convoy of 4 police cars left the station at 6 a.m. The cold wind blew down the road to Leonardtown Wharf, where Hanley lived in a small lakeside house. When the cars stopped, the silence was eerie. Only the sound of engines shutting off and boots crunching on wet ground broke it. Rudd led, holding the warrant. He knocked 3 times on the wooden door. Inside, slow footsteps approached, and the door opened. Robert Hanley appeared in the doorway, wearing a gray sweater, his face calm as if he'd expected this moment. I'm guessing it's about the car, he said, his voice hoarse. Yes, the car, Rudd replied, presenting the warrant. Robert Hanley, you're under arrest for second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. There was no resistance. Hanley glanced around the room, as if memorizing it. He extended his hand slowly. An officer stepped forward, cuffing him with gleaming steel handcuffs. The click echoed sharply in the quiet house, the sound of a town hero's image crumbling. As the police searched the house, Rudd stood silently in the living room. On the wall were old photos, Hanley with students, smiling brightly beside Volunteer of the Year plaque. Early morning light filtered through the window, dusting the frames with a thin layer. In a corner, a wooden shelf held a loosely locked tin box. Rudd opened it. Inside was a stack of faded Polaroid. He flipped through them. Rescue training sessions. The 2005 volunteer team, then paused at an unusual one. In the blurry frame, Emily Harper stood in Hanley's rescue cabin, wearing a denim jacket, her face unsmiling. Light slanted through the cabin window, reflecting off her cheek, her eyes slightly downcast, tense, not the pose of a volunteer wanting a photo. In the background, a glimpse of Hanley's familiar red jacket shoulder, faint handwriting in pen on the photo's edge, read "Before the storm." Rudd held the photo, a chill running down his spine. "Before the storm," he muttered. "Taken the night Emily vanished." A young officer beside him exhaled. "God, she was here." Rudd slipped the Polaroid into an evidence envelope, his eyes darkening. Outside, Hanley was led from the house. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, faces a mix of shock and disbelief. A woman whispered, "No way, he saved so many people." Another man replied quietly, "Maybe that's how he knew to hide someone so well." The scene grew chaotic as reporters' cameras flashed. As Hanley stepped into the police car, he turned, his cold gray eyes scanning the crowd. No trace of panic, just an eerie emptiness, as if everything was unfolding as he'd long accepted. He didn't resist, an officer said quietly to Rudd. "No, because he knows resisting is pointless." Rudd replied. The car drove off in silence. At the lake, the wind picked up, sending small waves lapping against the railing. The morning light reflected on the water, blurred like frosted glass. At the station, the Polaroid was placed on the examination table beside Emily Harper's case file. News spread within hours. Local TV aired an urgent broadcast. Robert Hanley, 2005 rescue hero, arrested on murder charges. Images of him in handcuffs filled the screen. In the town's central coffee shop, people watched in silence, only the sound of coffee cups clinking on tables. A man shook his head. "I let my kids take swim lessons with him." That evening, Rudd returned to St. Mary's Lake. The water was still, reflecting trembling streetlights. He opened the envelope, looking at the Polaroid again. Emily stood in the rescue cabin, her gaze heavy. A look of someone who realized they were in the wrong place, at the wrong time, before everything slipped out of control. The night wind blew, carrying the soft sound of waves lapping. Rudd folded the photo, tucking it into his jacket. Tomorrow, Hanley would face interrogation. But tonight, as the town reeled in shock, Jason Rudd knew a new chapter of the case had begun, one where the hero's mask was stripped away, and the truth began to speak. The next morning, Interrogation Room 3 at the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office was bathed in the cold glow of fluorescent lights. Robert Hanley sat on a metal chair, wrists still marked from handcuffs, but his face was utterly calm. His gray sweater was replaced with an orange jumpsuit, his hair slightly graying, his eyes still carrying an unsettling confidence. Across the table, Jason Rudd and Maya Torres sat, a thick case file before them, traces, the Polaroid, DNA reports, the danger area map. The air was thick. Rudd began, his voice steady. "Robert Hanley, you're under arrest for second-degree murder in the death of Emily Harper. Before we start, I need you to confirm, did you know Emily Harper?" Hanley looked up, his voice low and even. "Of course, I led the search team. I spent more days looking for her than anyone." He gave a faint smile. "Without me, no one would even know her name." Rudd didn't respond. He pulled out the Polaroid and placed it on the table. "This is Emily Harper, standing in your rescue cabin, taken before she vanished. Explain." Hanley stared at the photo for a long time. For a moment, his eyes flickered, but he returned to calm. "Just an old photo. I taught swimming to lots of students. Some dropped by. Maybe she came for a picture. It's been 20 years, how would I remember?" Maya cut in, her voice cold. "You wrote 'before the storm' on the photo's edge. The handwriting matches the danger area map. Not a coincidence, Hanley. You knew where she was that night." Hanley leaned back, chuckling softly. "You guys have great imagination. That storm swept half the state. I was just noting a tough time, and that map internal rescue team stuff, not murder evidence." Rudd tapped his pen lightly on the table, each tap deliberate. "Then explain the silver paint on your life jacket, an exact match for the paint on Emily's Honda Accord. Hanley went quiet. The hum of the ceiling air conditioner was suddenly loud. Then he spoke, his voice rougher. I worked plenty of car salvage jobs. Paint on my jacket is normal. It proves nothing. And your DNA on the driver's door handle? Maya asked. Hanley met her gaze, his eyes hardening. What do you know about rescue work? That night, I waded into the water, trying to open every suspicious car door. I touched dozens of vehicles. She could have been anywhere. That's not strange. Rudd stared at him for a long moment. But you never reported that in your logs. Instead, you banned sonar scans in the southern area, where we found the car. Why? Hanley gave a faint mocking smile. Because I was responsible for my team's safety. Detective, you weren't there. You don't know how strong those currents were. I didn't want anyone else dying. Rudd tapped the case file lightly on the table. No, you didn't want anyone finding that car. That's the truth. His voice was low, each word heavy on the metal table. Hanley tilted his head, his smile fading. You're accusing me based on assumptions. Maya stared at him intently. We have a witness, Mr. Hanley. Sarah Klein. She says she was with you at the lake that night, and saw a metallic glint underwater. You came back to shore panicked and told her to keep quiet. Hanley's shoulder twitched, the first sign of unease. Sarah Klein, he smirked. She's still around. I thought she left to forget the past. Rudd caught the slight tremble in his hand. Want to see her? Yes, Hanley said softly, his eyes darkening. I need to talk to her. She's the only one who'd understand what happened. No, Rudd said firmly. You'll talk to us. Here. Hanley gave a dry laugh, looking up at the ceiling light. You think you have it all, don't you? DNA paint, an old photo, an old witness, but you have no proof I killed anyone. You just have a story you want to believe. He leaned forward, locking eyes with Rudd. And you, Rudd, you just want to atone for giving up back then. The words cut like a knife. The room fell silent. Maya glanced at Rudd, seeing his eyes darken. Hanley leaned back, a faint smile on his lips. Emily Harper died in an accident, he said slowly. She left a party, drove in the rain, lost control, and went into the lake. I didn't push anyone, I was just the first to see headlights reflecting underwater. Is that so? Rudd asked, his voice hoarse. Why didn't you report it? Why ban scans of that area? Hanley went quiet, then spoke softly, almost a whisper. Because some truths are better left submerged, Jason. Sometimes pulling them up drowns everyone. The words hung heavy in the room. Maya shivered slightly. Hanley looked at them, his faint smile returned. Take me back to my cell, he said. I'm tired. As the steel door closed behind Hanley, Rudd sat still, staring at the Polaroid on the table. He's hiding something, Maya said. Rudd nodded, his voice low. Not just guilt, fear. Outside, rain began to fall. Drops hit the window, streaking down like the sky over Leonard Town was heavy with things left unsaid. On the third morning after the initial interrogation, the sky over Leonard Town was overcast, with drizzle lingering from the night. In interrogation room 3, the white light still shone down on the cold metal table. Robert Hanley sat there, wrists loosely cuffed, his eyes sunken from sleeplessness. Since his arrest, he hadn't spoken much, hadn't eaten, just stared blankly at the wall as if haunted by something. Jason Rudd walked in, holding a new stack of files. Maya Torres followed, placing a recorder on the table and switching on its red light. No one spoke for a few seconds. Rudd began in a low voice. Robert, you said Emily Harper died in an accident. But today, we have a new report from the mechanical examiner. Her car didn't swerve, it was struck on the left side. The impact angle matches the height of the tow truck you drove in. Hanley didn't react, only blinked slowly. Rudd placed a photo on the table, a dent on the Accord side, red paint streaks left behind. We also found red paint, same type as the paint on your tow truck. A moment of silence passed. Hanley looked up, lips pressed tight, voice hoarse. What do you want me to say, Jason? Rudd looked straight at him. I want the truth. Not for glory, not to convict you faster. Just the truth, after 20 years. Hanley bowed his head, his hands trembling slightly. The truth, it won't save anyone. He exhaled, shoulders slumping. I tried to forget, but every time I pass the lake, I still hear the water, like someone's calling my name. Maya sat silently, quietly noting every word. Rudd didn't interrupt. Hanley continued, his voice raspy, as if dragged from deep in his throat. That night, she came to my rescue cabin. It was pouring, wind howling. I was securing the boat when I saw her headlights. Emily stepped in, soaked, saying she wanted to ask about Lucas, her boyfriend. She thought I'd interfered, said something to make Lucas angry. I told her to go home, but she wouldn't listen. We argued. She got mad, stormed out. I grabbed her arm, trying to stop her. She slipped, fell down the slope by the dock. He paused, eyes reddening, voice nearly breaking. I heard her head hit the metal frame, then silence. I went into the water, pulled her up, but it was too late. She wasn't breathing anymore. The room fell silent. Maya looked at Rudd, eyes wide. Rudd spoke slowly, each word deliberate. You could have called for help. You could have reported it to the police. Hanley shook his head, tears starting to fall. I was scared. I'd been drinking and my tow truck had mechanical issues. I was afraid they'd think I killed her. I lost control. He gave a dry laugh, hands clenching until they were white. I put her in the car, planned to drive to the station, but stopped halfway. I couldn't do it. I took the car to the lake, pushed it into the water. I thought if there was no body, they'd call it an accident. I didn't think I'd carry it for 20 years. Rudd stared at him, unblinking. And the rest? I went back to the cabin, gathered my things, cleaned up. The next morning, I led the rescue team, pretending to search. I avoided that area. I knew it was deep enough to hide everything. I threatened Sarah because she saw the lights. I didn't want anyone to know. I'm not a monster. I was just stupid. The air felt thick, the sound of rain outside audible. Hanley looked up, voice fading. I didn't mean to kill her. It was just a mistake. Rudd sighed, voice rough. A mistake that buried a life. He stared at Hanley. Where is she? Hanley was silent for a long time. Then he covered his face with his hands, speaking almost inaudibly. At the edge of the forest north of the lake, where the old trail is, I buried her there. After pushing the car into the water, I was afraid someone would see. Maya jumped up, rushing out to alert the investigation team. Rudd stayed, looking at the man before him, no longer the strong rescuer, just a broken soul crushed by the past. I don't need forgiveness, Hanley said softly as police entered. I just want to sleep. That afternoon, police sealed off the forest north of St. Mary's Lake. The narrow trail was overgrown with thick grass, smelling of damp decay. The forensic team used ground-penetrating radar to search for disturbed soil. Near a large oak tree, they found a sunken patch, discolored compared to the surrounding area. When shovels hit something hard, no one spoke. The soil was carefully cleared, and in the twilight, small bone fragments appeared, mixed with rotted fabric. A technician's voice trembled. There's a bracelet, a small metal object, gleamed in the mud. A silver bracelet engraved with. Beside it was a rusted keychain shaped like a mini life preserver. The logo of Hanley's team. No one spoke, only the wind rustled through the trees. Rudd stood silently, eyes on the patch of earth. He removed his hat, bowing his head. Maya took photos, her hands trembling slightly. 20 years, she said softly, and she's finally coming home. DNA samples from the bones were sent to the lab that night. 3 days later, results confirmed, a complete match with Emily Harper's DNA profile, stored from. When the report was read, Rudd sat still, feeling a circle close. He looked out the window, seeing the lake shimmer in the dawn light. A chapter of darkness had ended, but the truth left scars, not just on the land, but in people's hearts. That evening, Margaret Harper received a call. "We found your daughter," Rudd said, voice choked. On the other end, there was only a soft sob, then silence. Finally she spoke through a breath. Thank you, for bringing her home." News of Robert Hanley's confession and revelation of Emily Harper's burial site spread through Leonardtown in a single morning. As the sun rose, local newspapers ran bold headlines. 2005 rescue hero charged with murder. TV broadcasts aired non-stop, interspersing old footage of Hanley in a red life vest, smiling warmly beside kids learning to swim. Now that same face appeared on screens in an orange prison jumpsuit, eyes cold and empty. The small, peaceful town of Leonardtown was shaken. The coffee shop on the main street was nearly empty. At the post office, people whispered fervently. "I let my daughter take swimming lessons with him," a woman said, voice breaking. "I can't believe it," an older man added. "We honored him for 20 years. Turns out, it was all a lie." On local social media, images of Hanley in handcuffs flooded feeds. Comments split into two camps: those who couldn't accept that their hero was a killer, and those angry that a guilty man was praised for too long. Old videos of Hanley speaking about dedication were clipped, aired with red text. "A murderer can still be applauded." Rudd watched the reactions in silence. He felt no joy, only a heavy heart. The truth always came at a cost. When a reporter asked, he said curtly, "We didn't arrest an icon, we arrested a criminal." At St. Mary's Church, that Sunday's service was more crowded than usual. The pastor said in his sermon, "No one is perfect. Evil sometimes wears the face of kindness." Many left with red eyes. Meanwhile, volunteers who worked with Hanley in 2005 began speaking out. A man named David Brooks, a former diver, told the media, "Honestly, we noticed something odd. He always stopped us from scanning the south side of the lake. Once I heard him on the radio, 'No one goes down there, got it?' When I asked why, he just said for safety. I trusted him." Another member, Linda Marquez, said Hanley often went to the lake alone at night, for months after the disappearance. "He said he was praying," she said. "Now I know he wasn't praying. He was keeping watch." Outside the police station, people brought flowers and candles, placing them beside Emily Harper's photo, the same one from missing person flyers, 20 years ago. The words "finally found" were written in white chalk on the pavement. Young people born after 2005 stood silently. They only knew the story through their parents, about the missing girl, the storm, and the hero who saved dozens. Now that legend crumbled in a day. Margaret Harper received official news that afternoon. Rudd personally delivered the DNA report and forensic conclusion. She sat silently, clutching the paper, lips trembling. "I thought I'd be happy knowing the truth," she said softly. "But it hurt so much." Rudd only bowed his head. "I know," he replied, "but at least now you can bring your daughter home." She nodded, tears falling onto the printed page. That evening, national news covered the Leonardtown case. The report opened with St. Mary's Lake in the fog, interspersed with images of Hanley being led away. The anchor said, "A 2-decade cold case has been solved." But with it, a community faces the truth that the man they trusted hid a terrible crime. At the end of the report, a reporter stood outside Hanley's small house. The windows were shut tight, the swim-safe sign removed. A child passing by asked his mother, "Mom, did he really save people?" She knelt, took his hand and said softly, "Yes, but he also took someone away." At the station, Rudd looked out the window. The town seemed cloaked in gloom. No one escaped the aftershock. He knew this case wasn't just about Emily Harper. It was about the ease of trust. How people eagerly honored someone without ever questioning. On his desk, Emily's high school graduation photo remained: bright eyes, youthful smile, brown hair loose. Rudd touched the photo lightly. "You've been seen, Emily," he whispered. "Not just in the water, but in the light." Outside, Leonardtown was strangely quiet that night. A light rain fell, blurring the rushed headlines. In the gentle wind, people said Mary's Lake had changed color, clearer, brighter, as if after 20 years, its surface was finally cleansed of its secret. After months of preparation, Robert Hanley's trial opened at the St. Mary's County Courthouse. Outside, a crowd gathered early: residents, reporters, and former volunteers who worked with Hanley in 2005. Inside, the courtroom was packed. In the front row, Margaret Harper sat silently, clutching her daughter's photo, her gaze calm but profound. Prosecutor Janet Russell began with a clear voice. "This is not just an accident. This is a deliberate cover-up, 20 years of lies wrapped in the image of a hero." She placed 4 key pieces of evidence on the table: DNA matching Hanley, a life vest with silver paint, a Polaroid of Emily in the cabin, and a lake map with a circled danger area. Each piece was projected on a screen, silencing the courtroom. Hanley sat in the dock, face aged, eyes deeply shadowed. When questioned by the prosecution, he said briefly, "It was an accident. I panicked. I didn't mean to hide the body. I was just scared." His voice was calm, but his hands shook when he saw Emily's photo, the girl in the rescue cabin, hair wet, eyes frantic. The defense attorney tried to shift focus. My client dedicated his life to the community. One mistake in panic doesn't make him a murderer. But Janet Russell countered, a mistake doesn't last 20 years. An innocent person doesn't threaten witnesses, block sonar scans, or bury a body in the woods. The climax came when Sarah Klein took the witness stand. She trembled slightly, but her gaze was steady. That night, I was with him, she said. I saw lights under the water, saw him return with his jacket soaked. I asked what happened, and he told me to keep quiet, or he'd ruin my life. I believed him, and I stayed silent for 20 years. The courtroom fell still. The sound of the clerk's pen scratching the record was clear in the quiet. When the prosecution asked its final question, Sarah looked straight at Hanley. I lived in fear, but today I'm not afraid anymore. The truth has surfaced, like the lake after a storm. The jury sat motionless. Janet Russell stepped forward, her voice slow but weighty. A mother lost her daughter. A community was deceived, and one man chose silence over redemption. Today the truth no longer lies beneath the water. Outside, a light rain fell. Hanley bowed his head, saying no more. Camera flashes lit up through the window, as reporters captured the moment Leonardtown faced the raw truth. Their hero never existed. For the first week, the town of Leonardtown held its breath. Rows of cars lined the streets around the old courthouse in the town center. Outside, reporters jostled to set up cameras, while inside, every seat was filled familiar faces from the small town, people who once called Hanley, Robert, with respect. Now they came to see their former icon face justice. Hanley appeared in an orange prison jumpsuit, hands loosely cuffed, silver hair disheveled, stepped slow. As he passed the rows of seats, no one spoke. Some lowered their eyes, others turned away. In the corner, Margaret Harper sat silently, a white handkerchief in hand, her gaze steady. She didn't look at Hanley, she stared straight ahead, where a small portrait of her daughter rested on the prosecutor's table. For the prosecution, Jason Rudd sat with the investigative team, silent, but present as a special witness. On the table a Polaroid, the danger area map, and forensic reports were neatly arranged, each a piece of a 20-year life. Prosecutor Janet Russell, known for handling cold cases, opened with a powerful statement. This is not just a case about a missing girl, this is a case about betrayed trust. A man hailed as a hero used that status to conceal his guilt for 20 years. Over the first 3 days of the trial, the jury heard the full timeline, vehicle inspection results, paint samples, DNA and a recorded confession. Hanley's voice echoed through the courtroom from the tape. I pushed her, she fell down the slope. I was scared. Those words reverberated, weighing down the room's atmosphere. A few in the back rows bowed their heads, tears falling. For the defense, Hanley sat silently, avoiding eye contact. His lawyer argued it was manslaughter, that Hanley acted in panic, not intent to kill. He's a man who saved dozens from the water, the lawyer said. That night, he made a mistake, driven by fear. But Janet Russell countered coldly, a mistake doesn't last 20 years. Hiding, threatening witnesses, staging the scene, those were choices, not accidents. When Sarah Klein took the witness stand, the room fell silent. She recounted the night of the storm, the glint of metal under the lake, and Hanley's threat, if you open your mouth, I'll ruin your life. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. When she glanced at the defendant's table, Hanley only bowed his head, avoiding her gaze. On the 5th day, the prosecution played a video of the car being recovered, and showed images of the bracelet, found with the remains. Margaret Harper broke into tears, and the jury sat stunned. Janet closed her argument with, justice doesn't drown in water, it only waits for someone brave enough to dive for it. As the jury deliberated, Leonardtown fell silent. One day, then two, then on the third morning, the jury returned. The courtroom rose as the foreman read the verdict. His voice was firm, each word like a nail driven into the air. Defendant Robert Hanley is found guilty of second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. The room erupted in murmurs, then fell silent. Hanley said nothing. He only closed his eyes briefly and sighed. As the judge delivered the sentence, his voice lowered. For the charge of second-degree murder, the defendant is sentenced to 40 years in prison. For obstruction of justice, 10 years to be served concurrently. The defendant will serve his sentence at the Maryland State Prison. Handcuffs clicked back onto Hanley's wrists. He didn't resist, only lowered his head. In that moment, there was no rescue hero, No vibrant red jacket, just an old man, bowed under the weight of 20 years of guilt. Margaret Harper sat still, hands clenched on her knees. As Hanley was led away, she whispered, her voice light as a breath, "Now you can rest, Emily." Tears fell, but they no longer trembled. They were the tears of someone who had walked a painful journey to find peace. Outside the courthouse, the sun shone softly. The gathered crowd stood quietly. No cheers, no anger, just watching as the prisoner transport van drove away. The next day's newspaper ran a bold headline, "Justice Returns to Leonardtown." Below it, a smaller line, "Author Unknown." 20 years later, the lake gave back its daughter. That evening, Rudd passed by St. Mary's Lake. Moonlight spread across the calm water, reflecting a gentle glow. He stopped at the shore, pulled the old Polaroid from his pocket, and let it fall into the water. The photo drifted, spun lightly, then sank. "Rest in peace," he whispered. In the breeze and the scent of cold water, St. Mary's Lake was silent, not the silence of secrets, but of serenity. After the trial, Leonardtown seemed to hold its breath. The Volunteer of the Year plaque bearing Robert Hanley's name was removed from the town hall, but its faint outline lingered on the wall like a memory the town couldn't erase. The community was divided. Some felt relief that justice was served. Others clung to the belief that Mr. Robert had only made a mistake. At the Central Cafe, the only topic on everyone's lips was the Emily Harper case. Parents who once sent their kids to swim lessons with Hanley whispered, "We trusted the wrong man." A former volunteer confided to the local paper that in 2005, Hanley had forbidden them from diving in the lake's southern area, where the car was later found. "We didn't dare question him. He was a hero," he said, staring into his cold coffee. Online, images of Hanley in handcuffs flooded feeds. The hashtag Justice for Emily spread across Maryland. National News aired a special "Cold Case Solved" after 20. In the segment, a reporter said, "The man Leonardtown once celebrated hid his greatest sin beneath the water, but amid the anger, there were moments of humane silence." At St. Mary's Church, a prayer service was held under light rain. The pastor said, "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means daring to face the darkness to find light again." Margaret Harper sat in the front row, clutching her rosary. Tears fell, but her face was calm. That evening, the local station replayed Emily's photo, a 19-year-old with clear blue eyes, captioned "Gone but never forgotten." Many turned off their TVs, but couldn't turn off the lingering guilt. Leonardtown lost its hero, but in return, it found the truth. And sometimes, that's the price of justice. No police, no reporters, just ordinary faces, standing quietly, looking toward the spot where the car was once recovered. Maya Torres, leading the group, stepped onto a wooden platform. "We're not here to talk about guilt," she said, her voice steady and warm. "We're here to remind everyone that justice never dies. It just needs someone patient enough to dive for it." Beside her, Ethan Cole turned on a projector, displaying sonar images, the silver metal shape emerging from the lakebed's darkness. A choked sound rose from the crowd, followed by slow, deep applause. From the Emily Harper case, Maryland launched the Emily Initiative, a fund to train and equip local police with sonar technology. "No family should wait 2 decades for the truth," the governor said at a press conference. In its first year, the fund helped solve 3 old missing persons cases. Each time a body was found, the press mentioned Emily Harper, not as a victim, but as a reason to keep searching. At the memorial's end, Maya released a white chrysanthemum wreath inscribed with "For Emily." It floated to the lake's center, spinning gently in the sunlight, reflecting a soft glow on the faces around it, like a gesture of forgiveness. Jason Rudd, now retired, stood quietly at a distance. A breeze tilted his hat, and in that moment, he felt at peace, as if the lake itself had been cleansed of its secrets. As night fell, the memorial's lights glowed. A bronze plaque caught the moonlight. She was found, and through her, others will be. Leonardtown was no longer a town of fear, but a place where justice was illuminated by light, the light of those who dared to search. 1 year after the trial, Leonardtown erected a memorial for Emily Harper by St. Mary's Lake. The tall white stone was engraved with bronze words, "She was found, and through her others will be." Below it, dozens of white chrysanthemum wreaths were placed weekly by townsfolk, a small but enduring ritual. The dedication ceremony was simple. No television, no cameras, only the sound of church bells and water gently lapping the shore. Margaret Harper sat in the front row, her white hair gleaming, holding a photo of her daughter Emily at 19, smiling gently in her graduation dress. When invited to speak, she said briefly, "My daughter came home." But above all, she helped others find their way back. From a community fund, the Harper Memorial Scholarship was born, supporting students in criminal investigation and underwater rescue. Maya Torres from the Deepwater team shared, "If Emily were alive, she'd probably be doing what we do, finding answers for others." Ethan replayed the Sonar video from the day the car emerged from the muddy depths. The crowd fell silent. When the silver car appeared, some bowed their heads, others quietly wept. Then a high school girl stood up and said, "I want to learn sonar technology to find missing people." Soft but genuine applause followed. As sunset fell, Margaret placed her hand on the stone, the day's last light glinting on the bronze words. "You left light for them," she whispered. The lake was still, reflecting the slowly drifting candles, like Emily's soul guiding those still shrouded in darkness. He flipped through pages, rereading old notes, evidence now resolved, paint samples, maps, Polaroid photos. Each page was a memory, a piece of a 20-year journey. Rudd signed the final line, "Case closed." He removed his police badge, placed it beside the file and stood. A window cracked open, the breeze carrying the scent of water from St. Mary's Lake. He smiled faintly. Justice, though late, was still justice. That afternoon, Rudd met Margaret by the lake. Neither spoke, just watched the candle she set adrift on the water. Its small flame reflected in their eyes, two people once divided by loss, now witnessing peace together. That evening, the final news broadcast aired, "The Emily Harper Case, Justice After 20, Mary's Lake Under Moonlight," with a voiceover, 20 years, a missing girl, a community reclaiming truth. Justice doesn't sink, it waits for those who dare to seek it. The final scene showed Rudd closing the file cabinet, the Detective Jason Rudd sign removed from his door. He looked back once, then left the station. On the small road to the lake, the wind stirred the oaks. The water reflected the town's lights. Peaceful, as if no storm had ever passed. Maya Torres rowed a small boat to the lake's center, carrying a white chrysanthemum wreath, tied with a ribbon reading "For Emily." The wreath spun slowly, drifting away, mirrored on the glassy surface. On the shore, Jason Rudd sat on an old wooden bench, holding a steaming coffee mug. His face bore time's marks, but his eyes were calm. Margaret Harper joined him, sitting silently. Together, they gazed at the lake where justice was once found. A documentary voiceover spoke, low and steady. In 2005, Emily Harper vanished in a storm. 20 years later, the water where she rested reflects not just memory, but truth. In Leonardtown, justice is no longer a word, it's light. The camera panned upward, Mary's Lake in morning sun, the memorial stone glowing through the mist, its bronze words catching the light. Truth rises, even from the deepest water. The final scene, Maya's wreath drifting toward the horizon. The voiceover concluded, "Truth never drowns, it only waits for the lake to still and rise." The screen faded to black, leaving only the soft sound of lapping water, and a quiet sense of peace, as justice finally rested. In the story Maryland 2005 Cold Case Solved, arrest shocks community, specific details offer practical quintessentially American lessons for life in the U.S. today. Don't blindly idolize, trust in processes and technology, and don't let silence prevail. Leonardtown once saw Robert Hanley as a hero for his red life vest and TV appearances, so when he banned sonar scans in the danger area Part 8, no one dared question him. Lesson: in American schools, churches and volunteer groups, build a culture of questioning and independent oversight, especially when someone holds symbolic power. Margaret's persistence, "Please don't forget" letters, and Detective Rudd's determination show the strength of community and authorities, sticking to process, preserving crime scenes, matching paint samples from the life vest, touch DNA on the door handle, parts 7 to 10, all standards any local police department can reinforce with regular training. Meanwhile, Sarah Klein reminds us that threats silence witnesses, Part 9. So schools and workplaces should maintain anonymous hotlines, whistleblower protections, and free counseling to let people speak truth without fear. Deepwater's Sonar ROV technology, parts 5 to 6, 18, proves the value of public-private partnerships. Cash-strapped towns can collaborate with nonprofits or community funds like the Emily Initiative to equip water search tools, vital in lake or river state. Finally, small choices save lives. Don't drive in storms, share your route, enable location tracking, use ride shares after parties, and if you see metal glinting underwater or anything odd, call 911. Justice may come late, but it only arrives when we stick to process, dare to question what everyone knows, and prioritize truth over image. Thank you for joining us on this journey to reclaim truth beneath the still waters of St. Mary's Lake, where justice rose after 20 years. Subscribe to our channel to continue exploring true crime stories that touch the heart, where every secret is illuminated by faith and perseverance.